Welcome back to RGR. I'm Ryan, and this is me going rogue. Hope you're excited about this NFL draft because I certainly am. Got a great thing for you today. Going to give away my draft board. As it's been set up, I'm going to walk you through it today. You're going to be able to find that at the link down below in the description. Pretty excited about the way that it's going to come off. So this is going to be simulcast on both the Locked On Chiefs podcast as well as the RGR channel. So keep all that in mind. If you're not subscribed over at RGR, make sure you hit that and the bell notification. Leave a thumbs up if you like this one, and make sure that you leave your comment below, etc., etc. If you're on the podcast, welcome. I'm going to walk you through it, even though you can't see it, but there'll be a link for you as well to download. So here we go. We're going to start over here on the board, and we'll just start at the top. You know, quarterbacks are the top draw. They're the top draw. There's nothing you can do about it. What you get into, though, is that I have things a little bit differently. I am one that, yes, Joe Burrow is tops for me. I'm all the same with that. I have no problem with that, or anyone who does. I don't know anybody that does, but that's just the way that it goes. But for me, when it comes down to it, you get to, we're hearing a lot of rumor right now. You know, we're almost 25 hours out from the draft right now as I'm recording this. A lot of rumors about what's going on with the quarterbacks, where they're going to go, and that kind of thing. And Justin Herbert is the talk of the Chargers at 6. A lot of people feeling like there are multiple teams that have him higher on the board than a number of quarterbacks that you expect. And I've done that here too, and that is for one simple reason, in that Tua Tagovailoa has a lot of injury history. And while everything is glowing right now, teams haven't been able to get their doctors on him and actually get their opinion all the way built out as they would normally hope to. That is a key thing for me. And so that brings me to where I feel like Tua is more risk than I'm comfortable with if I'm in a GM seat right now and I have to put my next 4 or 5 seasons on the line by drafting this quarterback number 1. I'm not willing to take that risk. So I have Herbert as a mid-round pick. That's just me because I do think he has flaws too. We know he's going to go a lot higher than that, but that's where I feel I would be comfortable taking him. And maybe that we should back up for a second and take a look at this board, because I'm drafting this board as though it were Chiefs-centric. So it is West Coast with a little bit of vertical thrown in there, RPO if you can, and a zone running scheme. I am also doing a defense and aiming towards a 4-3 base, so bigger ends, penetrating 3 techniques. Big nickel, so you have coverage linebackers, and guys that can play man coverage on the outside is the premium that I set. About 50% man versus coverage zone. So my top 2 are Burrow and Herbert. Then I get into the second round. At the very top of it is Tua, because I think a second round pick at the top of the draft is worth that risk that we were talking about. And then I have Jalen Hurts, followed by Jordan Love. I feel like Hurts is a better bet. You can say all you want to say about Jordan Love and the fact that he has some things that he does that are Mahomes-esque, and that might fit another team and make a team really feel like, hey, Mahomes did it, I can go get this Love kid. I just don't feel that that's as much a certainty as you get playing at Texas Tech, and certainly that you don't get playing at Utah State. I feel like Hurts is a guy that he's had like 6 offensive coordinators in his college career. He's played at Alabama. He's played at Oklahoma. He's won everywhere he's gone. He's a guy that is an athlete with his feet. So if things don't break down or he can't get what he needs initially in an offense, year 1, maybe even year 2, he can use his feet to help you in another way. And I feel like the Chiefs, sitting at 32, really do have that pick that everybody wants. You heard Therese Paylor talk about it. You heard everybody on Good Morning Football talk about 32 is a pick teams want to get that 5th year, particularly for the quarterbacks. So that's where I have them, my 1 through 5. There's a couple other guys that I think are draftable. They're down the line. When you get in front of this particular draft board, you see that there are some symbols next to everything. Not to everything, but to a number of players. And I want to highlight those now while we can. For those of you that are on the podcast, again, you might want to download this first before going any farther so you can get a look at it. And part of that is I have a key at the bottom of it, and that's I try to highlight guys that are either captains of their team or leaders of their team in some other way that are energy givers. You hear Andy Reid talk about that. A lot of coaches do that. They bring the level of play up for their guys. And so I highlight some of that here. Jordan Love is. Joe Burrow is. I also highlight who the athletes are at each position. The top 5, if they made the board, because there are some positions where a top 5 athlete doesn't necessarily mean that you're draftable. There are a lot of differences there, position specific. But I did highlight with these blue dots here that you'll be able to see on the board the athletes at each position that are in the top 5 that made the board. And then you'll see a couple of different things with red cards that indicate an injury suspicion or not necessarily confirmation that a guy's healed. That's a concern for me, and I do drop those guys. You'll see those all over this board as well. And you'll see a couple of these flashing light emojis that really indicate a position change or a guy that maybe was a tweener, and this is where I feel that he needs to play in order to be successful in the NFL. That's kind of the key here. There's a couple of other little things that you may find there. I don't have any toxic players on this board. Amazingly, I took them all off. Anybody who's got that bad of an off-field issue, they're gone. But there are a couple of red flags, guys that have a couple of issues. And there's also some Senior Bowl risers, so check those all out. When you look at the draft board overall, it's heavily weighted towards the defense. Usually I'm about within 5 or 10 picks. This year it's 15 more on the defensive side of the ball. And I think that goes to tell you the position group that is most highly coveted is the wide receivers, and they have the most draftable guys, in my opinion. So that's what I'm showing here as well. I want to make sure that that's nice and clear. So we're going to move on to the interior offensive lineman. I have Cesar Ruiz just like everybody else at the top of my board, but I have him in those last 4 picks. And you can see the tiers on my board, the top 10, the rest of the first round, and then the last 10 picks of the first round are kind of what these lines separate when you see them on the screen or after you download the sheet. And so I have him in the bottom 10 picks. Then I come back with Lloyd Cushenberry, who is a captain. Robert Hunt, who I do feel has played some tackle, has played a little bit of guard. I think he'll be a guard at the next level. And Matt Hennessy, who is a very good fit for the Chiefs in that he's an uber athlete for the position, and he is well-versed in the zone blocking system. You hope that I could speak by now, but, it's practice. Beyond Hennessy, you get into the third round, and you have some guys like Damian Lewis, Jonah Jackson, who's a captain, Ben Bredesen, who's a captain, Simpson's a captain. Nick Harris from UW is probably the only guy, and I have him at the very bottom of the third, that I'm saying is a zone scheme fit. Despite his anchor issues, his strength issues, he might be able to help you and grow into that role. He's not a Mitch Morse who can walk in and be strong enough. He's got to develop. But he is an option there. And then we get down into some of the others. Those of you that are big Moody fans, his injury concern is what drove him down the board for me. That's why he is in the 4th round. Moving on to the tackles. The big four, I have Becton at the bottom of them just because I'm not convinced that he's going to be able to stay healthy and stay mobile and be a 10-year tackle. I'm just a little bit concerned about the weight that he does carry and how well he'll be able to sustain himself in the NFL against pass rushers of a much higher quality. Wirfs, Wills, Thomas are my other top 3. If you can't see this and you're on the pod, follow closely in the second, which I think is a nice little area at the top of the second for tackles. That includes Ezra Cleveland, Austin Jackson from USC, Josh Jones, who was a captain at his school as well. I think that's important to remember. I have Isaiah Wilson in the second. I hear a lot of talk about him maybe being a first-round pick. I'm just going to leave him where he is because that's what I'm comfortable with. There's got to be a lot more projection for a team that takes him in the first round. I think there's more projection than I'm comfortable with. A guy to watch for down at the third is Ben Barch. Good athlete, small school. Then you have Prince Tega Anagwe, sorry, I can't pronounce those names, and Lucas Niang, both who had injury issues. And then you come down into the one Kansas prospect that I have on the board is Akeem Adeniji, followed by Jack Driscoll and a couple of others. You can get some names that you recognize. Charlie Heck, that might be familiar. Down on day 3. John Runyon down at day 3. There are options on there. Then we get into the running backs, and you all know how I feel about running backs. If you'd rather not listen, skip ahead about 30 seconds, and I'll have completed the running backs. I have Swift number 1. He was a captain. I think he's the best all-around fit and the best all-around player at the position. Then Dobbins, Taylor in the second round. No first-round running backs for me. And then I come back, and I actually prefer Cam Akers over Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I've got him a little bit higher in the second, although Helaire was a captain. And Zach Moss to round out the bottom of the third draft. And then you get into the big, thick part. There's 8 guys I have in the 4th and 5th rounds that I think are draftable, that could contribute to your team. Some names that you guys will recognize. Anthony McFarland, I think, is a long shot there, but I think the Chiefs like what he brings. Just keep an eye on him. Then we move over to the tight end position. And I, again, have no first-round tight ends. I just don't think any of them are that good. It's just a process this year. It's not the greatest class. And I'm going to call it like I see it rather than stretching somebody up there into the first round. I just don't think they're there. In fact, my tight end 1 played wide receiver at Notre Dame. You guys know that I like Chase Claypool in that role. I think he can be a slot H move tight end, and I do think he's the best pass catcher and the guy that gives you versatility on the offense. He would be my tight end 1, followed by his teammate Cole Kmet. Then down with Adam Trautman and Harrison Bryant, 2 guys that I think move well and are the next tier. And then for all you Mizzou fans, Albert O's down there at the bottom of the 3rd. I think he's good value there. I think he's got some things to prove, but I think his athleticism helps him a lot. Followed on day 3 by guys like Devin Asiasi. I think he's a really interesting prospect and a guy that's kind of stole my heart early, didn't have the season I had hoped for him, but a guy that I think also fits the Chiefs very well. Colby Parkinson from Stanford, a guy that makes a lot of plays, doesn't drop the ball, does a lot of things that the Chiefs like, and I think he could be a longer shot too. Followed by Bryson Hopkins, Thaddeus Moss down low, and a couple of guys to clean up the day. So now we hit the big offensive side, and we'll run through the wide receivers here before we take our break for the podcast. Jerry Jeudy, I have him number 1. I have him over Lamb because of the route running, because of the a little bit more explosive. If you saw the RAC draft guide, you see the production values as well as the athleticism values. And I think both of them are interesting and a little bit ahead of Ruggs on the field in terms of how they run routes, how they get open. I have Ruggs 3, and I have Justin Jefferson 4. Pretty much chalk. I know you guys are used to that. Ruggs is the premier athletic talent in this not only this position, but in this draft. And then I come back, and I have Brandon Ayuk a little bit higher than probably a lot of you do, and I have him above Mims. Don't tell Dan Harms because he's going to be upset. I have Mims next, followed by Rigger, Higgins, Hamler, Pittman, and Edwards. Edwards is a guy that I think hasn't got a lot of pub, but I think he does a very good job. Another captain along with Michael Pittman and KJ Hill as well. A couple of guys that do some very interesting things. Now, I have Laviska Shenault pretty far down. I have him at the bottom of the 3rd, and it's because I am scared to death of his injury history. I feel like he's kind of bigger than he ought to be for his body a little bit. I think he can do some very interesting things. It would be really cool to see in the Chiefs' offense, but I'm not convinced that he's actually fit or that he can actually stay healthy. So I can't invest a 2nd-round pick in him, even at 63, so I have him down in the 3rd round. My guess is he'll probably go higher than that, but that's where I feel comfortable with him. And then you get into the meat of it. And there are so many wide receivers in this class. It is the most draftable at 33 I have on the board, and the vast bulk of them are in rounds 4 and 5. So we're going to go through them real quick for the pod, and if you can see it on here, on RGR. Antonio Gandy Golden, I like his play. I think he is a big body receiver that actually has the ability to cut and get some separation. I like him. James Roche is really productive. I like his play. Kind of a smaller guy, going to fit in with the Hills and Hardmans. You got to have some body too, though. Then Gabriel Davis, Lynn Bowden's in there. I have Devin Duvernay over Colin Johnson. I think Duvernay's the better wide receiver coming out of Texas, and I think that's important. And then we get the guy right there in the middle of round 4, Antonio Gibson. I think he's still more of a wide receiver. The NFL seems to think he's a running back, and they're going to plug him in there. I think it's because of the way that he cuts and doesn't drop his hips on routes, and I think that's something that he can learn. I still feel he's more of an impact player split out than behind the line of scrimmage. Then John Hightower, Isaiah Coulter. You get into Donovan Peoples-Jones, who is one of the premier athletes in this group. It will be available at 5. And I think that's another thing the board will show you is that you can get leadership value, you can get athletic value all through the draft at different positions. There are guys in the top 5 athletes at each position all the way down, all the way into the 7th, which you don't see every year. Usually about the 5th, they start to peter out, but there's a number in the 6th and one in the 7th. There are a number of guys. I think you guys just got to dig into it here because I'm running long. So we're going to take a break for the podcast. We'll come back and we'll get on to the defense. Now, when we take a look at the board, I want to reiterate again that I only have 24 first-round grades. I have 41 in the 2nd, 38 in the 3rd, and 41 again in the 4th round, as well as 37 in the 5th, and then it tails off as it normally would. This is deep. Usually, I don't have anything more than 30-ish at the 4th and 5th round level. So there's quite a number of players that are more draftable than an average year. And when you look at the defensive side of the ball, Derek Brown, I think, is pretty much unanimously thought of as the best player in the D-line class. I have no problem with that. I don't think he's going to be a guy that's going to be a perennial sack artist, but he's going to do a good job. He's going to motivate the interior of that group for you. And I think he'd be an interesting addition. He was a team captain. So is Javon Kinlaw, the next guy down, who I feel is probably a high teens pick, in my opinion. And I like some of the things that he does, but you have Derek Nottie. So for the Chiefs, it's difficult to see even trying to get him in a way to play the one technique when you have Nottie. I think you're really looking for a penetrative 3 to 5 technique, a guy to replace what Agba did, a guy that can substitute inside for, relief if Chris Jones isn't on this roster, or if you need to sub in and get more pass rush pressure from the 3 tech. The guy that really stands out to me is he played edge in college, and he's not an edge. I think he's really that kind of guy that really fits Spag's system. In Marlon Davidson, another captain at Auburn. Both of their captains are first-round picks on the defensive line. I think that's great. Then followed by Ross Blaylock, Justin Madubuike, and Neville Gallimore, who I think might be the value pick in the 2nd round. I have him kind of in the mid to late section. I think Gallimore is really interesting. I think he plays super hard, and I think he's got a little bit ways to go, but he could be the penetrator that could really fit for the Chiefs if they choose to do that in the 2nd round. Don't be surprised. James Lynch in the 3rd really puts out a lot of effort. I'm not huge on Raekwon Davis. I put him down here because I think that's about where his value is. And another Mizzou guy in the 3rd round in Jordan Elliott. When you get into the 3rd day, that's where it gets pretty interesting, and you might find some diamonds in the rough. Leki Fotu, another captain out at Utah. I think he's really interesting. I think he plays nasty. Jason Strobridge is a guy, again, that can fit what Spags likes with Agba and Okafor, playing all the way down into the 3 tech if you have to. But he can play that 5. He can rush gaps in the 4. He can play outside if he has to. He has stood up in college. He has rushed from all of those positions. And I think he's a work in progress that I think might be worth the investment quite a bit in the 4th round. Then you get into all kinds of guys that you've heard the names of. The brothers Davis from Nebraska are low-end picks, in my opinion, in the 6th and 7th rounds, respectively, but they bring a lot of athleticism. I think that's an investment worth making if the Chiefs do trade back and get some picks in those rounds. We go over to the edge, pretty much a consensus. Chase Young is the best player in this draft, period. I have him at the top. It's him and his nemesis, Joe Burrow, for me, for the top pick, followed by Clavian Chasen. I have trouble saying K. Levon, but I'm not sure how he pronounces it. I'll find that out if he becomes a Chief. If not, I think that he's the guy with the best outside linebacker type play. I know he can play inside some, but I do feel like for this scheme, he's really not that much of a fit. I think it would be a stretch. For those of you that are thinking about the Chiefs moving up, I don't think Chason would be the target. Then you get into the 2nd tier guys, and day 3 I think is a pretty good area for them. I'm sorry, day 2. I have Yetur Gross-Matos above Epinesa. I think Epinesa, while he could fit for the Chiefs, I just don't think he's going to be that good of a player at the college level. He's a one-trick pony in terms of power, and he uses his length very well, but I don't think he can adjust. I don't think he can stunt very well. I don't think he can do the things that Steve Spagnuolo wants to do, but maybe Daly can turn him around if they were to reach for him there. Followed by Josh Uche, who is a 3-4 linebacker that doesn't fit this scheme in my opinion, but could be a Swiss Army knife. I think we heard Dan talk about that yesterday. Terrell Lewis, a guy that showed up on my radar that I think really could be interesting is John Greenard from Florida, another captain, but a guy that has that kind of tweener traits like Justin Houston, that he could be a 3-4 stand-up outside linebacker. He can be a D-end. I like what he brings, and he brings a good motor, so I'm interested in that. Curtis Weaver is the guy you've heard about not having a very good body to get around the edge, but he does that pretty well. So it's reward versus risk here, and I think he is kind of a risk. I would put him where I have him here at the top of the third is about as early as I would take him, and knowing that the caveat is he's still a risk. Then on to Julian Okwara, a guy, I wish his arms were longer, and I like some of the things that he does. He's got to increase his toughness. He's got to want to play a little bit more, but when he turns it on, I think he's got it there to give. Jabari Zuniga is one of the best athletes at the position. He's late in the third for me. Same with Kareem Khalid, Okwara's teammate. And then Brandon Anai, who I think is pretty tough, pretty powerful. I'm not sure he's got that great a plan going forward about how he's going to attack things, so I put him here at the bottom of day 2 before the reset. And after the reset, you have a lot of rushers that are good but not great and need some improvement, need some things to do to get forward on it. And Anthony Jennings is at the top of my list. I like the way that he plays. I feel that he could be a fit in this system. He does have some growth to go, but I'm okay with that at that particular position. As long as we expect Alex Okafor to return for the Chiefs, I'm perfectly comfortable with that. Alton Robinson, Darrell Taylor, leaders, captains. DJ Wonnum's a guy that I feel like has a lot of potential that he hasn't reached yet. He's from South Carolina. I like him in the 5th. That might be an option down late, along with Derek Tushka, who comes from North Dakota State, but really has a motor. And I think, like some of the small school rushers you've seen in the past, he might be able to adapt. It is a question, it is not a foregone conclusion, but I think that's about where you might take a risk on him in the 5th. Carter Coughlin, Jonah Williams kind of round out the group. And then we move on to the linebackers. And you guys know how I feel about the top 3. I do have Murray over Queen. We'll see what the NFL feels. I think either of them will work in a different way for this defense. I just am a little more akin to Murray. And then you come down into the second, Malik Harrison. I have him as the 4th off the board because I feel he's more athletic than he's given credit for. I think he can do anything for you. And I'm looking at him and Murray specifically as guys that can take over the Mike duties when Anthony Hitchens' contract has expired, because I don't expect him back. I don't expect him extended. Along with that, Zach Bond's really popular. I see a lot of him going in the first round. I don't think that's anywhere near accurate. You have to remember, he is making a transition. He's a pass rusher in a small body. Playing off ball, being able to diagnose, run sideline to sideline. I think he's got good athleticism, not great. And I do feel that this is a bit of a risk. Like Hassan Reddick, I don't think that's going to be an easy transition, and so I have him here in the 2nd round. Along with Logan Wilson, who I think is a natural nickel linebacker from Wyoming. I feel he's a little overpowered some, especially taking on guards, but he's got a nose for the ball. He's a leader. He and Bond have both been captains. I think that's valuable, especially to the Kansas City Chiefs. And I like him here at the bottom of the 2nd. I don't think he'll last till mid-3rd. Definitely not till the Chiefs pick at the bottom of the 3rd. And speaking of the 3rd round, we have Willie Gay Jr., a guy with a red flag here because of his off-the-field problems, because he didn't play much last season, but he is an uber athlete. And he's a guy that if you want to take a risk and you're okay cutting him loose if you have to, 3rd round's about where I would do that. I think Akeem David Gaither is a little bit undersized, but I think he can do a lot of the job, especially in coverage. Justin Strand's a really interesting one for me, and I'm probably saying his name incorrectly, but at the bottom of the 3rd, he's worth taking a chance on. If you can't get a linebacker that you like earlier up, and we know the Chiefs want a coverage linebacker, so I think that could be an option there. Jordan Brooks is just undersized for me. I like the way that he plays. I'm not sure he can carry that over to the NFL level, so I have him as an early day 3 guy in the 4th round. Same as Troy Dye, who I think plays coverage well, doesn't take on blocks well, doesn't stick his face in there, and I don't think he's going to be able to be a consistent tackler at the next level, so I have him in the 4th, along with Jacob Phillips, who's the exact opposite. He is the unheralded guy next to Patrick Queen. I think he plays the run 10 times better. I think he's a little concerning when it talks about, can you take a running back in man? That's definitely a challenge for him. I like him in short hooks. That's perfectly fine. And for a 4th round guy, down low, I'm perfectly comfortable with him coming onto this roster and being able to bolster as a backup year 1. And again, another guy that could possibly take over the reins as a Mike backer, knowing that he has a couple of limitations, but a guy that can be a leader. I know he hasn't done that at that level drastically, but I expect that he can in the future. rounded out by a couple of guys that are interesting. Cale Garrett from Mizzou is going to be a 7th rounder, in my opinion. Shaq Quarterman, somebody to keep an eye on in the 5th. I know Therese definitely likes him quite a bit. I'm pretty straightforward on the corner group, and when we get there, Okudah and Henderson, I still have them in that order. That may not be what happens from some of the people that I'm hearing from that actually know people in the league. We'll see what happens, but I think either way, it's about fit. I think Okudah's an outside. I think Henderson's probably better inside. We'll see what happens. And then I have Christian Fulton and Trevon Diggs on the top. I think just in terms of what they can do with them, I think Spags is going to be comfortable with those guys. Fulton for the experience, Diggs for the big body. Diggs still reminds me of Sean Smith quite a bit. So I think there's some motivation that has to happen there, but that's okay. I think Jalen Johnson is a plug-and-play smart player. He's not the uber athlete, and he's not overly sized, so he's kind of a tweener there, but I think he can get the job done. Gladney's really feisty, but I'm concerned about his size. I would move him into nickel if it were me, but we have to see what they think about Rashad Fenton there as well. And then A.J. Terrell, a guy that had up and down bad national championship game. I'm concerned about his feet. I'm concerned about him getting turned around by some of the route runners, especially in the AFC West. But we've seen that happen to him at the college level. I'm not convinced that he's going to be a guy that can make a smooth transition. And it might be a year or two before he's able to actually live up to his potential if he's taken in the 2nd round. We'll see what happens. Noah Igbenogany, as well as Damon Arnett, I have them in the low 2nd as well. Experience, motivation, a little bit of drawbacks there. Both of them, I think, can play at the next level, though. Bryce Hall is a guy that I have, another captain, a super competitive ball hawk. He is ball hawk number 1. When I teased this yesterday, that's really what I was getting to. Got the final data and really crunched it all back down. And if you did buy the Rogue Analytics draft guide, there is an update that I put up late Tuesday night. Go grab that again, and it restacks the production for the cornerbacks. I like what he brings. There's an injury concern. There's, not the most versatility. I think he's more of a zone guy. Could he move to safety? That's definitely a possibility, but we have to see. A selection like that from the Chiefs indicates where Spags wants to go with the defense. And I do think it is a little bit more slanted towards the zone that way. Dantzler, Troy Pride, and a guy who snuck into the 3rd round on me that I didn't expect to put there was Reggie Robinson. Productive, good athlete. I think a lot of room for improvement there. And then we get into day 3. At the top, I think, is where you got to go if you want to get a corner. Everything beyond round 5 is iffy concern, in my opinion. But right now, I have Amik Robertson at the top of round 4, followed closely by John Reed, who is really productive in terms of being a ball hawk. He's very athletic. He's a nice round mixture. I think he played on the boundary a lot. He could come into the nickel and I think give you a really interesting second option at the nickel position. Followed by Darnay Holmes. And then Michael Ajamudia. I think those are probably the end of what's really draftable. And I know a lot of people are real high on Amik Robertson. I'd like the way that he plays too. But at 5'8" and an 3/8. Don't mean to steal that from you, Amik. It's just too much of a concern. It's just too much body and experience that puts you in a bad position. I think he can make a roster. I think he can contribute. He's just got to be a nickel for me. I don't think he can play on the outside very well in the NFL. And so that really limits what I'm willing to spend on him, and it's got to be a 4th rounder at that point. And then we get into the last position group, the safeties. Xavier McKinney, I think he's hands down a guy that can do a little bit of everything. I think he's more athletic on film than he tested, so I'm comfortable with that. But again, he's the only 1st rounder that I have. I don't see a lot there. You're going to hear about Grant Delpit could sneak in there, true. Chin and Duggar, they could sneak in there too. Duggar and Chin are 2 of the top athletes at the position, so I think that helps them a little bit. And Delpit, if it's not for the tackling, I think he's a guy that covers well. I think you have a lot of versatility there, but I think they're all, except for McKinney, 2nd round guys. So you're not making that 1st round investment. I think these are guys that could be targets because I think they can all play a little bit of nickel. They could play safety clearly and be versatile. If the Chiefs trade back, these might be some of the targets that they're looking for. Followed by Ashton Davis. Antoine Winfield Jr. in the 3rd. Love the way that he plays. Again, he, like Amik Robertson, a guy that is challenged by his size. And whether he can make that transition and be an impact at the NFL level, it's a question mark for me. Top of the 3rd is where I put him because I wasn't comfortable in the 2nd. but I'm definitely comfortable in the third, despite his height challenge and being in a position to have to take on guys that are much bigger and more aggressive because of their body size. The NFL, it's just a different thing. And that is it. Those are the guys that are in the first top 100 picks. And then it gets into a bunch of question marks on day 3. Blackman, Jones, guys that play good at times. I see a lot of lapses in their film, not uber athletes. The 2 uber athletes are going to be in the 4th round, in my opinion. It's going to be L'Jarius Sneed and Tanner Muse, both guys that have very good athleticism, are a little more straight line. Sneed's a little bit thin. Muse is a little bit stiff in his transitions, but I think they're guys that, again, can play deep, can play rover, can be very versatile in the Chiefs scheme, and bring the athleticism to back it up. I like both of them there. Followed by Terrell Burgess, another Utah safety. Kevon Wallace, I think there's some mental slips in a lot of his game. I put him in the 5th because of that, even though he was a captain, and he is one of the top athletes. Antoine Brooks. Davian Taylor, this is where I slotted him. I don't think he's a linebacker at the next level. I think he's got to play safety, and that's a pretty significant change. I'm not sure that he can hold up. He and Geno Stone, J.R. Reed, 2 other captains, are here in the 5th round. And then to round those out, I could see Gilman or Fuller on a lark if you end up with a 6th-round pick. And that's my board for this year. I hope that you guys enjoyed it. Whether you're watching on RGR Football or whether you're listening to Locked on Chiefs podcast, you can get this at the links in the descriptions, both in the podcast and the video. I hope you guys enjoy it. The live stream will be on RGR Football on draft night during the draft, and then we will follow it up with a podcast as well. So I hope you guys are pumped. I certainly am. Looking forward to it, and I will check in with you next time.